Vasudevaya. Shrimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 14, Text 18. Anvitai, who follow. Translation. The king is supposed to be pious, in whose state and cities the general populace strictly observes the system of 8 social orders of Varna and Ashrama, and where all the citizens engage in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their particular occupations. Purport. The state's duty and the citizen's duty are very nicely explained in this verse. The activities of the government head or king, as well as the activities of the citizens, should be so directed that ultimately everyone engages in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The king, or government head, is supposed to be the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and is therefore supposed to see that things go on nicely and that the citizens are situated in the scientific social order comprised of 4 Varnas and 4 Ashramas. In the Vishnu Purana, it is stated that unless people are educated or situated in the scientific social order comprised of 4 Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, and 4 Ashramas, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Banaprastha, and Sannyas, society can never be considered real human society, nor can it make any advancement towards the ultimate goal of human life. It is the duty of the government to see that things go on in terms of Varna and Ashrama. As stated herein, Bhagavan Yagya Purusha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, is the Yagya Purusha. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Bhoktaram Jagya Tapasam, Krishna is the ultimate purpose of all sacrifice. He is also the enjoyer of all sacrifices. Therefore he is known as Yagya Purusha. The word Yagya Purusha indicates Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna, or any personality of Godhead in the category of Vishnu Tattva. In perfect human society, people are situated in the orders of Varna and Ashrama, and are engaged in worshipping Lord Vishnu by their respective activities. Every citizen engaged in an occupation renders service by the resultant actions of his activities. That is the perfection of life. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Yata pravitira bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam sakarmana tam abhyacharya siddhim vindati manava. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings, and who is all-pervading, man can, in the performance of his own duty, attain perfection. Thus the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Rudras, and Vaishyas must execute their prescribed duties as these duties are stated in the Shastras. In this way, everyone can satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. The king or government head has to see that the citizens are thus engaged. In other words, the state or the government must not deviate from its duty by declaring that the state is a secular one, which has no interest in whether or not the people advance in Varnashram Dharma. Today, people engaged in government service and people who rule over the citizens have no respect for the Varnashram Dharma. They complacently feel that the state is secular. In such a government, no one can be happy. The people must follow the Varnashram Dharma, and the king must see that they are following it nicely. Ishwarastre pure chaiva bhagavan yagya purusha ijite svena dharmena yajanayar varnashraman vitae. The king is supposed to be pious, in whose state and cities the general populace strictly observes the system of 8 social orders of Varna and Ashrama, and where all citizens engage in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their particular occupations. So here, in this verse, the very basis of human society is described. In the state, everybody lives in a state. You cannot live outside of a state. One must live within some kind of social framework. Otherwise there's chaos. We also live within a state. If there was no such state, then there would only be rogues and thieves running around. There already is, but anyway, this is an example. There would only be rogues and thieves running around, and people would be totally unprotected. So we also live in a state. However, when the state peoples also act like that, like the very persons they're trying to protect you against, then there's no real shelter. But at least there's something. If there wasn't anything, there'd be complete chaos. So, the situation within which Krishna consciousness is set is very important. The circumstances, the surroundings, just like when you have a diamond, and that diamond is set in a cheap copper band, then nobody takes the diamond seriously, is it not? They think it's just some kind of stone glass. It may be real and genuine, but because of the circumstance it is set in, it is not taken seriously. If you even have a jewel-like part of the human society, yet it is established in a not very beautiful setting, then you don't have the appreciation for this very jewel-like thing. Therefore, we cannot just simply divorce ourselves from the human society, and neither do we. We want to influence the human society so that its quality will increase, so that this diamond of Krishna consciousness will be set in the proper way. Will be set in the proper way, so that it actually looks very nice. So the king is supposed to insist on varnashram. He's the protector of the varnashram system. That's why as soon as the kings degraded, the whole varnashram fell apart. And why did the kings degrade? Because the brahmanas degraded. And why did the brahmanas degrade? Because it's Kali Yuga. And in Kali Yuga everything degrades. That's simply the way it is. Kali Yuga is an era of degradation. And because of that, it's even more important. It's even more important that the society be strictly enforced as a varnashram society. Varnashram society does not mean police state by any means. In fact, it's quite a free society, because the lines of activity are demarcated. The limits of action by each particular order is there, and though everyone knows it. Everyone knows what Brahmins should do and shouldn't do, what Kshatriyas should do, shouldn't do, Vaishyas should do, shouldn't do, Shudras should do, shouldn't do. And if someone acts outside of that, then nobody accepts that. That's rejected by the whole society. Nowadays, there's no distinction anymore. Everything is continuously being redefined at the moment. How one is how one acts. One day he can be a madman, the next day he can be a king, the next day he can be a worker, the next day anything. It can all change at any moment. And the only defining factor is money or sex or requirement for advancement of position. These are the defining factors in this material world. That which keeps people controlled. But in Varnashram, there is no such fascism. Economic fascism. Political fascism. Sensual fascism. Where at gunpoint, we are forced to act in a certain way. We generally don't think of our senses as little fascists in the body. But they are. Each body has its SS Truppen, who are just with their boots kicking on our face. 5 of them, and 1 within. Manaksastani Indriyani Prakatinstani Karshati. 5 SS men, called the nose, the tongue, the eyes, the ears, and the touch sensation. And the little Hitler within, called the mind. And together they are busy kicking on our face again and again, keeping us down in the material world. And we are suffering. Sensual fascism. Do this now! No! Now! And then, although it's much more subtly done, economically they hand out a carrot in front of the mule, in front of the donkey, it's got the carrot. This is just fascism, but it's more clever. Here, you want this carrot? You want to be big man? Big position? Lot of money? Big Volvo 760? Here, you just come and try more. Try more. Get more. Do more work. Make sure you please the presidents of the companies, and make sure you please your bank. Make sure you please your local government representative by political maneuvering. You will become big, big. Yeah. Another form of persuasion. It's not that the fascist only uses strict principles of stick beating. No, not at all. He uses psychological persuasion. Yeah. The little Goebbels. Psychologically convincing one that, yes, the best thing for him is to just go on serving the material nature like this. In this way, one becomes completely bound up. But in Varnashram, there's a freedom there. And that is something which is overlooked by many persons, including our own devotees. That freedom is you don't have to fall under such manipulation, because the control is naturally there. And nobody objects once they're a little purified, because it is according to their nature. Brahmana should follow his qualities. Kshatriya follow his qualities. And that does not mean he should go out. He should not go out of those qualities. And if he sticks within those qualities, then he's peaceful. Because it's his nature and it's his duty. And he's allowed to do that according to his nature and duty within that certain category. What more freedom could you want? There's no freedom to act outside of your nature. Now, is that bad? And who would want to act outside of his nature but a madman? Or a member of the Kali Yuga human society? Because in Kali Yuga, so-called human society, people are told that they should act according to the ideals which are given to them by the outside society. They make advertising that this is the ideal person and you should be like him. They always have models who have beautiful looking bodies, consuming various nasty things on TV or on billboards. Everything has some beautiful model. So then you think, yes, that could be me, or I could enjoy that like this. See the ideal, the goal. And everybody's brainwashed in this way. Brainwashed into thinking the goal of life is to have a nice house. The goal of life is to have a nice car. The goal of life is to smoke the right cigarette. The goal of life is to drink the right beer. The goal of life is to watch TV, eat, and have some sex, and go to sleep. And that's it. Nothing more. And this is given as the goal, and those who do it best, they are glorified. And even those who are glorified are generally part of the grand illusion too. They themselves aren't even successful at the eating, sleeping, mating, and defending business either. But it's all a grand illusion. Everybody's accepting that this is going on wonderfully, and I should follow that person, he's happy, and I should follow this movie star, they're happy, and I should follow this rock star, he's happy. And look at this politician, he's got everything together, and look at this businessman, what a rich man, I should follow him. And in this way, other values are placed in our heads from the very beginning of life through the TV set. The TV is the number one propaganda agent of the modern society. It used to be difficult without TV. Therefore, Adolf used to use films. There has to be some kind of external media by which people become, somehow their minds surrender to something which is not a person. And in this way they can give up their own discrimination much easier. So they started doing it with films. They found out that films were a wonderful way to teach people because they don't identify with any particular person. It's just a screen with a picture. So they identify that it's just a picture. They don't feel fear. But the message goes in. Actually, according to the experts in this regard, the film is a much more potent media than TV. But the television is great because also the nice radiation makes you dull. And the way in which the picture is constantly coming from very birth, one starts to accept from his very childhood that the pictures I see on that TV are what should guide my life, and this is the way I want to be, like the man on TV. And in this way, everybody surrenders from birth. TV generation, much easier to control. Because the values are given. The biggest thing they complain about our kids is they don't watch TV. You read any article where it talks negatively about our Gurukul, and the first thing they say is, do you ever watch TV? And the kids say, what is TV? And they say, just see how they're being brainwashed. They don't watch TV. They're already so much brainwashed by TV, they think unless you're brainwashed by TV, you can't be normal. This is the modern human society. So what freedom is there? You've got freedom now to be manipulated and brainwashed. Whereas in Varnashram, there's no such brainwashing techniques. There's just a good society which supports itself by its own fruits. Good fruits. You learn from a satisfied parent how to be a satisfied citizen. That is the proof of a society, that it continues itself simply by the nature of the satisfaction of the previous generations, who also know how you should act to maintain that satisfaction. And the Brahmanas are there to teach. Morning classes, or traveling home to home. Some Brahmanas just traveled home to home, door to door, giving spiritual instruction or material instruction, or they had their little schools outside the city. The children would come and sit down. Of course, that's in a place where there's such a climate where you could have school outside every day, or else inside. In a little colder places, they went inside. In very cold places, they don't even bother with school. And school, that's another joke. Teaching everybody all the same useless knowledge that you never remember. Basic knowledge is required where South America is. There is such a place called South America. There are people there too. They're called South Americans. They speak Spanish and Portuguese. Yeah. Some basic understanding has to be there. But to know that in Brasilia the per capita income is so and so, and they produce so many tons of aluminum every year, and so many tons of oil, and this and that. Well, what is the use? And what have you gained? But you have to waste your time making a report. Yes, Brazil, capital, Brasilia, population, 110 million. Main products, garbage, etc. And for those who have a mind which can be trained, they should be trained. And they will be trained. Everybody has to do something. Economic need is also there. Everybody has to support himself. There's no free society. Varnashram society is not free economic society. One must actually be engaged positively. No lazy men allowed. Yeah. But if one is actually a lazy man, then he may be supported. Intolerably lazy man. You remember the story about the lazy men, right? Yeah. Everybody knows the story? No? All right, I'll tell again the story of the lazy man. The king was having a hard time with his citizens because they wouldn't do anything. They were all saying they were lazy men, they couldn't work. So the king said, well, what are we going to do? The minister said, well, we should think of something clever to find out who's lazy. So they arranged some scheme to make a big pavilion, and the different persons were invited who considered themselves lazy. The king said, anyone who's actually a lazy man can come and take food free. So then all the people came. Whole kingdom was there in the Prasadam room there, all packed up, ready for Prasadam. So then the king and the minister lit the place on fire and started burning it to the ground. And everybody ran out like mad to protect themselves from the fire, except for two men. And one of them said to the other, my, it's getting very hot in here. And the other said, roll over on the other side. Then the king said, these are actually lazy men, feed them. They're so lazy they couldn't even leave the fire, so you can feed them. So, people will take advantage. When there's a soft condition, they will take advantage. Welfare state means a lot of cheating going on. A lot of people with nothing to do. So then what do? Well, they figure out how to make money by dealing in drugs or stealing or making fraud or doing all kinds of nasty things. Welfare state ultimately means big criminals, more and more. As a man not engaged has to do something, so he engages himself in nasty things. Varnashram's not like that. The king is supposed to make sure everybody's engaged, at least according to his capacity. Even persons who are totally useless and can't be engaged in anything else, the king would take them and let them build roads for him. The kings would always use everybody. Once when Prabhupada was walking through some park, I forgot where, there were all kinds of lazy men laying around. Prabhupada said, these lazy men, they should be engaged by the government. Not that the government shall have so many troubles and have to pay welfare to so many lazy men. If a person's actually disabled or old, too old, or orphan, or widow without any means of support, the government may take care of them, and the government should take care of them. After the battle of Kurukshetra, Maharaj Yudhisthira took care of all the widows and their children in his kingdom. There were millions of them. And he took care of each and every one of them very carefully. He protected them, maintained them, because that was the duty of the king. But Prabhupada said, the government should engage all these persons. They need more roads, they may build roads, and they may get good salary. Anyway, government would have to pay construction company, so they can use these persons. This method made very good roads. They were called the king's roads. The royal road. You hear that sometimes. Even if one is going on the royal road, there may be dangers in the traveling. So the royal roads were built by these men. The king engaged some expert foremen and engineers, and the royal roads were built by all kinds of classes of lazy men who got a good salary too. They did all right. And they were maintained by the king. They were not just given money, but they were given a place to stay, food to eat, clothes to wear. They were not unhappy. Of course, later on, when you get into the ages which are more near to us, this is called indentured servitorship, where they just force somebody to work and they don't give them anything, leave them in some rags, freezing in a mud hut somewhere. That was not the Vedic standard. The Vedic standard was not like that at all. The Vedic standard was so high that even the golden plates were thrown away from the Rajasuya sacrifice and nobody picked them up, simply because they didn't think they needed them. Everybody had what they needed. There was not lust on behalf of the people. Of course, the Vaishya must have some lust for economic development. Without that lust, he'll never develop economically, because after all, economic development is made of lust. So, he has his kind of lust. The Kshatriya, he has his lust to control. Yeah. The Sudra, he has his lust. Period. Everybody's got his desire. And when it's really strong, it's called lust. Yeah. So, all of these things have to be regulated. Otherwise, there's chaos. People can understand these principles. But when you finally make the final conclusion, which is obvious, that everything has to be regulated in some kind of system, they say, no, no, no. They understand all the principles up to the point of having to accept some system of regulation, because they just don't want to be regulated. They're like a child who is used to running here and there and doing what it wants when it wants. And therefore they cannot accept the principles of regulation. But Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls these principles regulated principles of freedom. When one accepts these regulative principles, he becomes free. And so long as one is bound up by so-called freedom, he has to and move in this direction or move in that direction according to his whims, which means according to the 5 pushed here, pushed there, do this, do that. Confirmed. Just see the senses demanding in so many ways submission, surrender. So if we can surrender to our senses, why can't we surrender to Krishna? It's the same surrender. You allow your life to be ruled by the senses, then you can allow your life to be ruled by Krishna. What is the difference? We're not in control either way. It's either the senses are in control or Krishna is in control. But if the senses are in control, at the end we get lumps on the head. And if Krishna is in control, at the end we get pure love. So take your choice. Make your decision. See what you'd rather have. Eternity, knowledge, and bliss, or birth, death, old age, and disease. Think about it carefully. Decide and act accordingly. You have that freedom. Krishna says, Vimishai Shada Sheshana, Yateshtasi Tatakuru. Think about it carefully. Deliberate on it fully and do whatever you like. Is that callousness on the part of Krishna? He doesn't care? No, because in the next verse he says, but if you don't listen to me, and you act according to your own whims, you will anyway be engaged in the material energy, and you will anyway have to act, and you will anyway suffer. So don't forget, if you surrender to me, your life will become sublime. And if you don't, you'll anyway act for surrender, but now to the bad master, Maya. The bad master, Maya, who is just keeping us bound up day and night in suffering condition of life. Therefore, one should be very, very careful what direction he moves in, by always surrendering to Krishna, thinking of Krishna, acting for Krishna, and chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, and make his life sublime. Hare Krishna.